Hi.
Hi. All right, so I'll start then.
Great.
Start with sustainability, I suppose, because I think everybody outside of economics is quite well aware that the current social economic system that we've got is unsustainable. We cannot sustain exponential growth, and the money system that we have is driving this exponential growth. So we've been actually looking at sort of alternative can we have, what sort of alternative socio-economic system can we have that is sustainable? So that's what we've been looking at, and the system we've got really sort of splits society into two in some ways. We've got a technical side and a people side. As the technical side is the bit that's more interesting to us, that's the technical administration of all the technology in society. People side is something we'll leave to the people to decide themselves. So on the technical side, one thing we would like to do is actually remove money from the equation. The money system we have at the moment, especially this fiat money, is one of the major driving forces as to why the system is unsustainable. The system we have today has to keep on growing exponentially to survive. And of course, no natural system can actually keep exponential growth going. So we need to move away from the money system we've got. And what we're looking at is, well, essentially what we've got is a resource allocation system. We have raw materials we allocate to goods and goods to people. So we're looking at an alternative way of managing that, but based around the use of energy. And so we have a system what we call energy accounting, where we look at the energy it takes to actually produce a good, and the value of the goods, as it were, is contained within the energy it takes to produce it. So we measure production capacity in energy is what we're actually doing. And then all the citizens has an equal share to the production capacity to decide how they want to produce things. But behind this is going to have to be some intelligent management, which is where the experts come in, which is also why this is a type of technocracy, because the experts are managing the system. So you actually want to manage the system so we actually have minimum material, minimize our production, yet still be able to maintain a good standard of living. And the research that we've seen go into this type of thing says we could probably manage to keep today's standard of living with a quarter of what we're actually doing today. So we've got plenty of room to actually adjust the system and manage the system into something that is sustainable. Now, we're trying to take a scientific approach to this. So what we're trying to do is test the ideas out. First of all, we're trying to test it out on our own group. So the way we try to organise ourselves is where we'll try to think that a future society could actually organise itself. And the organisation we got structured is what we call a holonic structure. And holon means each independent entity is both an entity in its own right and also part of something else. So it's like I suppose you could actually view it as a network, a peer-to-peer network type structure, where decisions are made very local to where people are affected by the decision, rather than having a very large centralised authority. It's a much more distributed type of government. So we're trying to work with that within our group. We're trying to simulate. We actually do have an up and running working simulator, but we still need some work on this. But we're trying to simulate an energy accounting system and see how would that work. At the moment, we're working on a very, as it were, a macroeconomic level. But we do actually have a simulator going, so we should want to start working more with that and actually test it out. Ultimately, if you're going to talk about any sustainable society, you've actually got to talk about real people. So we want to actually try and build up communities, a network of communities to actually start testing these ideas out with. That network we call a prototechnate as an experimental platform, but it could also form a platform to move from today's unsustainable systems to tomorrow's sustainable system as well. What should we talk a bit more about the prototechnate?
Yeah, I was just
as
about
I
to
said,
say.
Sorry?
About that. I was just about to say, can you tell us something about that?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the best way to describe it is to see it as a network of communities and not-for-profit organisations. Those not-for-profit organisations can be things like companies, or they can be the communities themselves, actually. The idea is that you have internal to the communities should be working in a money-less society, exchanging goods using energy accountancy. But as this prototechnate is going to be still embedded within the money system, as it were, you need some money interface. So that's where the non-profit organisations come in. They deal with money, they deal with buying services, producing goods, but they do it not for profit. So they're not a profit-making entity. Inside, we talk about these communities. We're trying to base these on what's called eco-units, which is something that's being developed in Sweden for a sustainable, I suppose, a village up to about 200 people. And these eco-units, they produce their own food, they produce their own energy, and they manage their own waste. So they're all contained units in that sort of sense. In some ways, you can view them as like a colony on an alien planet. In some ways, they're all self-contained. Of course, they're not totally isolated from the world outside, but they manage everything in as much as possible internally. And then they have a bit additional production capacity, which they can use for producing goods and services for the other communities in there. Work on trying to get that on, where we're trying to actually get membership documents onto that. We've got 2 companies up and running in Slovenia at the moment. We hope to get a 3rd one up and running in Sweden, and with more companies coming along in the next few years. Once those companies start working, we hopefully actually start to build a community with actual people on some land somewhere. But this is all experimental. It's all meant to be testing out the idea, so we get some sort of empirical data to see whether or not things will work.
How are these communities? Sorry, just a very quick question. Are these communities are very different from, say, some of the eco-villages around the world?
I think they have much overlaps with a lot of things around the world. We've been looking at things like Twin Oaks. I don't know if you look at there's somewhere in India we've been looking at. Also kibbutz in Israel, they get sort of inspiration ideas. Mondragon is another example of things we've been looking at too. And of course, eco-villages are actually very popular in Sweden as well. I think the main difference is the organisational structure of it. Eco-units are also the systems for waste management and everything is all contained within the system. Energy production, food production is all contained within those as well. But the administration of it, administrating it so it's non-profit, so you don't use money internally, and also forming it up as a network. Often a lot of these eco-villages are done independently, but they can link up with other groups, so you do have some sort of overlay. But the network is somewhat weaker, and what we're trying to do as well. Networking is a very important part of how this should work. So each community is not an isolated block. It actually exists within a network, and it's the network that keeps sustaining it.
Great, thank you.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Did you want to make any more points before I open to questions? I'm sure people will have a few questions.
On my list here, I've got one other thing which says motivation. When you talk about a moneyless society, everybody asks about how you're going to motivate people. So maybe I can have a quick mention on that, and that is it's more difficult to motivate people when you don't have money, because money is such a blanket for so many different motivators. But the money itself is not the motivator, it's something that you can get with the money that's the motivator. So when you come into motivation in a moneyless society, it does become more difficult, but you can still design the work around the people. And if you design the work around the people, then the people will want to actually do the work, rather than try and force people to do dull, boring jobs. We get people who actually want to do those work because they enjoy those sort of things. I think that's the last point I had on my list. Okay, questions?
Yeah, thank you. Any questions?